The afternoon heat pressed down on the Arizona plains, warping the air above the sand like thin glass. A single gunshot cracked the silence. Then another. Jackson Blackwood ducked behind a fallen mesquite tree, blood seeping from his left shoulder. Three men from Redstone Mining had him pinned. The Colt 45 in his hand felt heavy, warm from recent fire. He counted 2 bullets left. Not enough for the men hunting him, but enough for what mattered. "You're a dead man, Blackwood." The voice belonged to Haverton's lead enforcer. "Nobody stands against Redstone and lives." Jackson's mind flashed to his homestead. Now nothing but charred timber. To his wife, Sarah's laughter. His boy, Michael's smile. Both gone to the cholera outbreak last year. The disease had ravaged the county, stripped everything from him. Everything except his gun and his name. "Never thought I'd die in dirt like this," he muttered, checking his wound. The bullet had gone clean through. Painful, but survivable. If these men didn't finish the job first. He steadied his breathing, the way he'd learned in the 10th Cavalry. 6 years scouting Apache territory had taught him patience. Death came quick to men who panicked. As boots crunched closer on dry soil, Jackson's fingers tightened around his Colt. No running now, only choices about how to meet the end. A week earlier, Jackson had been checking the lower valley for signs of water. 2 wells had dried up, and the cattle trails nearby had gone silent. The land was dying, same as everything else he'd touched since losing the ranch. That's when he saw her, kneeling by a cracked riverbed, digging with a piece of bone. Her long black hair, streaked with dirt, framed a face marked by years under the Arizona sun. An Apache woman, exhausted but determined, searching for water where there was none. Jackson dismounted, keeping a cautious distance. His years in the cavalry had taught him respect for the Apache, both their ferocity and their resilience. The woman hadn't noticed him yet, too focused on her desperate task. He uncapped his canteen and stepped forward. "Here." She turned sharply, dark eyes finding his. Her hand moved instinctively toward a knife hidden in her worn blanket. Her gaze assessed him with the precision of someone who'd survived by reading danger quickly. "It's clean," Jackson said, extending the canteen further. For long seconds, neither moved. Then slowly she rose and approached, taking the offering with both hands. She drank carefully, measuring each sip as if it might be her last. When finished, she returned the half-empty canteen without a word. Jackson nodded toward the riverbed. "No use digging here. Ground's too hard." She wiped her mouth with the back of a wrist marked with old scars, burns and cuts that told their own story of survival. "You from the settlement north?" he asked. "What's left of it?" Her voice was quiet but firm, bearing no trace of fear. "My name is Asha." He noticed a small tattoo on her wrist, 3 lines intersecting in the Apache symbol for strength. But something else caught his eye. A Buffalo Soldiers regimental mark branded into her forearm, a mark they'd put on Apache captives during the war. "You served with them," she said, noticing his gaze on the mark. Not a question. A judgment. Jackson pushed back his sleeve, revealing a cavalry tattoo partially obscured by a burn scar. 10th Regiment, 6 years. Left when the killing got senseless. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. "My husband was killed by soldiers 3 years ago, defending our water rights." Jackson absorbed this in silence. Nothing to say that would matter. "There are men watching the valley," he said instead. "Redstone Mining. They've been pushing north, taking whatever land they want." "I know these men," she replied. "They've driven most of my people from their homes. My sons." Her voice hardened. "They took my sons to work their mines. Takota and Ahote, 12 and 10 years old." The revelation hung between them, another layer of understanding. Jackson replaced his canteen, mounted his horse, and tipped his hat. "Storm's coming. Riverbed will flood. If you need shelter, I've got a cabin half a mile east. She studied him, weighing his words against years of betrayal. Why would you help me? Not everyone's at war anymore, Jackson answered. Some of us are just trying to survive. As he rode away, he felt her eyes on his back, measuring the truth of a white man's words. That night, as darkness fell and the desert wind rose, a sharp knock came at Jackson's door. He grabbed his Winchester, approached cautiously, and pulled it open. Asha stood there, but not with food or gratitude. Her face was taut with urgency. 6 men, she said without greeting, armed, heading this way. They've been watching both our lands. Jackson pulled her inside, doused the lamp. How long? 20 minutes, maybe less. They have rifles. Following the creek. Jackson moved to a trunk, pulled out extra ammunition. Why are you warning me? In the darkness, Asha's eyes reflected the last embers of the fireplace. You gave me water. I give you time. Equal exchange. Outside, distant voices carried on the night air. Jackson peered through the window. Torches moved through the darkness. Men on horseback approaching from the west. They want more than land, Asha said, crouching beside him. They're looking for something specific. What? A map. Ancient Apache gold mine. My husband hid the true map before they killed him. Jackson's mind raced. The previous owner of this land had been found dead in town. Accident was the official word. Now it made sense. We can't fight 6 armed men, Jackson said, gathering essentials. Not here. Asha nodded toward the back door. I know these hills. Places to hide. If we leave now. Jackson hesitated only long enough to grab his father's old pocket watch from beside the bed. Everything else was replaceable. As they slipped out the back, flames erupted at the front of the cabin. Men's voices shouted orders. A tall figure, silhouetted against the fire, directed the others. Haverton himself, owner of Redstone Mining, recognizable by his distinctive Confederate officer's hat. Burn it all, his voice carried through the night. Blackwood and the Apache woman, no witnesses. Jackson and Asha melted into the darkness, using the growing flames as cover. The hills rose before them, full of shadows and hidden paths. Behind them, Jackson's new beginning turned to ash. Ahead, only uncertainty and the promise of violence. By dawn, they'd reached higher ground, a hidden canyon where Asha led Jackson to a small Apache settlement. 15 people, mostly women and children, living in makeshift shelters, survivors of Haverton's expansion. An older man stepped forward. Nahaley, their elder, regarded Jackson with suspicion born from decades of betrayal. He helped me, Asha said in Apache, then switched to English. He's being hunted by the same men. Nahaley studied Jackson's face. Why would a white man fight against his own kind? Jackson met the elder's gaze. They're not my kind. I was a military judge before I was a rancher. I've seen what men like Haverton do, how they twist law to their purpose. Laws, Nahaley scoffed. White man's laws change like wind when gold is found. The law I believe in doesn't change, Jackson replied. But men forget it when convenient. Nahaley led them to a small fire where others gathered. He unrolled a deerskin map pointing to marked locations across the territory. This valley was Apache land for 500 years. Then Spanish came, found gold. Used our people as slaves in mines. Many died. When Americans came, they found abandoned mines, thought Spanish took all gold, but we sealed the richest veins, hid entrances. Asha continued. My husband was keeper of the true map. Haverton learned of it, demanded it. When he refused, her voice remained steady, though her eyes darkened with memory. Haverton thinks I have the map, Jackson realized, because I bought land from someone who knew your husband. Nahaley nodded. Haverton believes all parts of map will lead to greatest mine. But what map truly shows is evidence. Evidence of massacre, Spanish records, proof this land was stolen through murder, enough to challenge Redstone's claims in federal court. Jackson felt the weight of this revelation. Not just land or gold, but justice, something he'd abandoned hope for long ago. I was a military prosecutor, Jackson said. I know how evidence works, how to present it. Asha and Nahaley exchanged glances. Then perhaps the spirits guided you here, the elder said, for purpose greater than either revenge or survival. That night, while others slept, Asha found Jackson sitting alone, staring at the distant lights of Haverton's mining camp. Your shoulder needs tending, she said, kneeling beside him with herbs and bandages. As she worked, her fingers sure and gentle against his wound, Jackson spoke. I had a family once, wife, son. The cholera took them both. I couldn't save them. Asha continued working, her silence an invitation to continue. After that, I just existed. No purpose, just waiting for time to pass. She secured the bandage and met his eyes. My sons were taken during the raids, but I will find them. Her certainty stirred something in Jackson, a clarity he'd lost in grief. We need to get into that mining camp, he said. Find the evidence. Find your sons. But we'll need help. Asha's expression hardened with resolve. Then we will make a war party, not for revenge, for justice. Under the vast Arizona sky, a plan began to form between them. Not just survival now, but purpose. A reason to fight that went beyond personal grievance. For the first time since burying his family, Jackson felt something like hope stirring in his chest. Small, fragile, but alive. 3 days later, Jackson rode into town alone. Haverton's men would be watching, but he couldn't hide forever. His first stop, the town marshal's office. Marshal Sullivan was a thin man with calculating eyes who'd never shown much interest in enforcing laws against Redstone mining. Thought you'd be dead by now, Blackwood, Sullivan said, barely looking up from his desk. Disappointed? Jackson asked, dropping into the chair opposite. Just surprised. Haverton doesn't leave loose ends. Sullivan finally met his gaze. What do you want? Information about federal mining claims and territorial courts. Sullivan's eyes narrowed. Dangerous questions. Men get killed asking those around here. I'm already a dead man walking, Jackson replied. Might as well make it count. Something shifted in Sullivan's manner. He closed his office door, pulled down the shade. What I'm about to tell you stays between us, he said quietly. I'm not just the marshal. I'm a federal investigator. Been tracking Haverton for months. He's forged land claims, murdered competitors, used forced labor. Jackson processed this revelation. Then why haven't you arrested him? Need evidence that would stand in federal court. Witnesses, documents. Sullivan leaned forward. And something else you should know. That cholera outbreak last year wasn't natural. We found evidence Haverton's men contaminated water supplies on farms he wanted to acquire, including yours. Jackson's blood ran cold. You're saying he murdered my family? For land? Sullivan nodded grimly. He's done it before. Different methods, same result. But I need proof that will stand in court. Jackson's grief transformed, crystallized into something harder. If someone had that proof, then Haverton hangs. But whoever brought that evidence would need protection. Powerful men don't fall without fighting. Jackson stood to leave. Hypothetically, how long would you need to arrange federal marshals? 3 days, no more. Outside, Jackson felt eyes on him from the saloon across the street. Haverton's men, watching, waiting. He mounted his horse and rode slowly out of town, careful to leave a trail they could follow. The trap was being set. That night, as planned, Asha led a small group through the hills toward Haverton's main mining camp. 5 Apache warriors moved silently through darkness, while Jackson approached from the opposite direction, a deliberate distraction. The mining camp sprawled across the valley, wooden structures, guard towers, and rows of simple huts where workers were kept. Near the main office stood a reinforced building, the company vault, where Haverton kept both gold and documents. Jackson's role was to draw attention to the north side, while Asha's group infiltrated from the south. As he approached the perimeter, he fired 2 shots into the air. Guards shouted, lanterns flared to life. Men rushed toward the disturbance. In the confusion, Asha and 2 warriors slipped into the camp. They moved toward the row of worker huts, searching for her sons while the others headed for the vault. Jackson engaged in a brief shootout, enough to maintain attention without getting himself killed. He glimpsed Haverton emerging from the main building, shouting orders. Meanwhile, Asha searched frantically through the worker quarters. The first 2 huts yielded nothing. At the third, a guard blocked her path. She dispatched him silently with her knife, a skill honed from years of survival. Inside, among 20 exhausted workers, she found Dakota, her older son. "Mother?" The boy's disbelief turned to silent tears as she embraced him. "Where is Ahote?" she whispered. "Separated. Different hut. The one with guards. They took the younger boys there." Asha's blood chilled. The special hut was at the far end of the camp, heavily guarded. At the vault, the other warriors discovered more than expected. Not just Spanish records, but ledgers documenting Haverton's crimes. Most damning was a letter implicating him in deliberately spreading the cholera disease to drive farmers from valuable land. Exact details of how water sources were contaminated with infected animal carcasses. As they gathered the evidence, alarm bells rang out. Their time had run out. Jackson, pinned down near the north fence, saw Asha and Dakota running toward the special hut. 2 guards stood at its door. Without hesitation, Asha's bow sang twice. Both men fell. Inside, they found Ahote and 5 other young boys chained to the wall. Haverton had been using them to explore narrow mine shafts too dangerous for men. As they freed the children, Haverton himself spotted them from across the camp. "The Apache woman! Shoot her!" Haverton bellowed, raising his own rifle. Jackson fired his last round, forcing Haverton to duck. It gave Asha enough time to gather the children, but separated Jackson further from escape. Bullets splintered wood around him. Outnumbered, outgunned, he prepared for his last stand. Then unexpected gunfire erupted behind Haverton's men. Marshal Sullivan had arrived with deputies earlier than planned. The distraction allowed Jackson to break free, running toward the hills. Halfway up the slope, a bullet caught his shoulder, spinning him to the ground. 3 of Haverton's men pursued while the others engaged Sullivan's deputies. As Jackson took cover behind the fallen tree, blood seeping through his shirt, he knew he was trapped. 2 bullets left. Not enough. Then a war cry shattered the night. Arrows whistled through darkness, finding 2 of Haverton's men. Asha emerged from the shadows, knife gleaming. The 3rd man turned his gun toward her. Jackson's Colt roared one final time, dropping the gunman before he could fire. Silence fell, broken only by distant gunfire from the camp below. "You should have kept running," Jackson said as Asha helped him up. Her eyes held his in the moonlight. "My people do not abandon allies. This is your fight too now." Together they made their way to the rendezvous point where the others waited with the documents and free children. Sullivan arrived an hour later, bloodied but victorious. "Haverton escaped," the marshal reported, "but his operation is finished. These documents prove everything. Land fraud, forced labor, murder. Even federal judges can't ignore this evidence." Jackson examined the Spanish records, detailed accounts of the mines, the massacres, and most importantly, legal proof that the land had been Apache territory before any American claims. Most damning was Haverton's journal, detailing his plan to infect water sources with cholera. Jackson's hands trembled as he read his own name listed among the obstacles to be removed. "This will take months in court," Sullivan warned, "and Haverton has friends in high places." "Then we'll fight months," Jackson replied, looking at the faces of the freed children. "I've got nothing but time." Asha, standing with her sons, spoke with quiet certainty. "We have fought for generations. A few months in your courts is nothing." By dawn, they had reached the Apache settlement. As the first light touched the canyon walls, Jackson stood with Asha overlooking the valley. Below, smoke still rose from Haverton's camp. "What will you do when this is finished?" she asked. Jackson considered the question. For so long he'd lived without future, only past. Build something that lasts, maybe. Something more than just survival. Asha nodded toward her sons, now sleeping safely for the first time in years. "That is what we all seek. Not just to live, but to have reason for living." The territorial court proceedings lasted 4 months. Haverton's lawyers fought every accusation, but the evidence was overwhelming. Jackson testified for 6 days, detailing the systematic land theft, the forced labor, and the deliberate spreading of disease. Asha's testimony, translated from Apache, moved even the hardened judge. She described her husband's murder, her son's captivity, and the generations of abuse her people had endured. When she produced the Spanish documents proving original Apache ownership of the lands, Haverton's case collapsed. The courtroom erupted when the verdict came. Haverton was sentenced to hang for murder, fraud, and crimes against the territory. His mining operations were to be dismantled, the land returned to its rightful owners. But Haverton had one final move. The night before his execution, he escaped with the help of bribed guards. A note was found in his cell. "This isn't over, Blackwood." Despite the shadow, life began anew in the valley. With redstone mining disbanded, the Apache people reclaimed their ancestral lands. The federal government, embarrassed by the revelations, provided reparations to build proper homes and irrigation systems. Jackson used his knowledge of farming to help establish crops. Asha taught traditional Apache water finding techniques that made the desert bloom. Together, they created something neither thought possible again: a community. 1 year later, Jackson stood on the porch of his new cabin, watching riders approach from the east. Marshal Sullivan, now wearing the badge of a federal lawman, dismounted first. "Official paperwork," Sullivan announced, handing over documents. "Federal land grant recognizing Apache sovereignty in this valley. Signed by the president himself." Jackson examined the papers. Victory had been hard won. The settlement had grown to 50 people, both Apache families returning from forced relocation and settlers who respected their ways. "Haverton?" Jackson asked. Sullivan's expression darkened. "Spotted in Mexico last month. Gathering men, according to reports." "He'll come back," Jackson said. Not a question, but a certainty. "Yes, but he won't find what he expects." Sullivan gestured toward the thriving community. "This isn't just scattered survivors anymore." As Sullivan departed, Asha joined Jackson on the porch. Her sons had grown stronger, their nightmares less frequent. Dakota was learning to shoot from Jackson, while teaching him Apache tracking in return. Ahote showed promise as a healer, learning both from his mother and the settlement's new doctor. "The council has voted," Asha said. "They ask you to be our representative to the territorial government, a bridge between worlds." Jackson looked at the community they'd built together, Apache traditions blending with new innovations, creating something stronger than either alone. "I'm not sure I'm the right man," he said. "You are exactly the right man," she replied. "You understand both justice and loss, and you have proven your word is strong." That evening, the community gathered to celebrate the land grant. Apache songs mingled with settler fiddles. Children who once feared each other now played together. The elders sat with Jackson, planning irrigation expansions and trading routes. As night fell, Jackson found a moment alone with Asha near the edge of the settlement. "My husband believed the land remembers kindness," she said, looking out across the valley they'd reclaimed, "that it returns what is given to it." Jackson nodded, feeling the truth of her words in the thriving community around them. "I didn't expect to find purpose again. After Sarah and Michael, I thought there was nothing left. And now? Now I have something worth fighting for, something worth building." They stood in comfortable silence, their shadows stretching long across the ground they'd both bled to protect. Not lovers, but something perhaps more enduring, allies who had found redemption in each other's broken worlds. The next morning, a scout reported dust on the horizon, riders approaching from the south, too many to be traitors. Jackson loaded his Winchester. Asha readied her bow. The community moved with practiced efficiency, women and children to the caves, men to defensive positions. This time, they were not unprepared victims. "Haverton?" Asha asked as they took position on the ridge. "Likely," Jackson replied, checking his ammunition. "He always was a poor loser." She smiled grimly, nocking an arrow. "Then he should not play games with people who have nothing left to lose." As the riders approached, Jackson felt no fear, only clarity. The land beneath him had taken everything once. Now it had given something back, something worth defending to his last breath. "Whatever comes," he said quietly, "we face it together." Asha nodded, her eyes on the approaching threat. Together, as it was meant to be. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the valley in golden light. The same light that had witnessed centuries of bloodshed now shone on a people united, standing firm against those who would take what wasn't theirs. Jackson chambered around. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack, a sound that once meant loneliness, but now simply belonged to the land they all shared, a land worth fighting for. A land where honor still mattered, a land where even broken souls could find purpose again, a land they would defend together.